All right, Airbnb family, this is a fun one. So there's a lady, as reported in the San Francisco Chronicle article here, that she is under arrest for trying to evict a tenant that was an Airbnb guest that earned their tenant's rights. We did a video previously about what to do if you need to evict an Airbnb guest. I warned you all before. This lady obviously is not a subscriber to the channel, that Airbnb guests can become a tenant in as little as a week here in Texas, and in other states like California, they'll still award tenancy even before 28 days. So we're going to talk about how to avoid giving somebody tenancy by accident, and if an Airbnb guest does not vacate and they're a tenant, like what you should do. Like, this is something that you all should know, because you're going to go to jail like this woman. Now, she's not the only Airbnb host to ever go to jail. There's a guy in Australia that killed his tenant for not having the money. He went to jail. There's an operator in Nashville who was operating an illegal Airbnb because they gave him a fine for not having permits, and he still hosted, and they put him in jail for like a day. There's a guy in China that was illegally surveilling this woman by like hiding a camera in a router, and this IT chick found it, and that guy went to jail for like 20 days for like illegal surveillance. So Airbnb host going to jail is not a new thing. But in this case, how do you not get in trouble? Because this typically doesn't end up like going like where you go to jail. You just end up losing your eviction case is typically how this goes. This woman tried to forcibly remove people by staging a break-in. So she basically broke into her own home that wasn't her home anymore, and that was illegal. That's kind of what happened. She was doing something that a lawyer will tell you is called self-help. They'll also refer to this in eviction court as a self-help practice, where you try to lock somebody out, or you shut the electricity off, or you remove the front door to a property. These are all self-help techniques that are not allowed when evicting a tenant. So, hey, I can actually see some comments. Cool. So anyway, so you're evicting some tenants, and they're there for more than 28 days. You have to go through a standard eviction process, which means you have to put a notice to vacate inside of the front door. If you have a reason not to, like say that they have a dog or it's dangerous, you can put it on the front door and you can mail it to them. And at that point, you give them like basically 3 days to vacate if they have like a delinquency, which is like non-payment of rent. Then you have to file an eviction petition, take them to court. You have to win that petition, and then they have an appeal window. If they don't appeal, you then file for a writ of possession, and at that point you can have a police officer remove them from the property. So how do you prevent this from happening? Let's say you're afraid that you're gonna have a guest who's staying there for like 10 days and you don't want them to gain tenancy. We had a guest who tried to do this in 2 weeks in Texas. There's a property where he like booked for a couple weeks, like did some bad stuff, got kicked out of the property by the building, and was trying to claim that he was a tenant because basically the building made him upset, and the police removed him for having like drug users at the property. So the way that we were able to not have him be awarded tenancies, we never allowed him to use the mailbox. That's number one. People who want to establish tenancy at a property will mail themselves things. So don't let somebody have a mailbox. If you have a home, right, and it's not an apartment complex like ours, take your regular mailbox down and put one of those lockable mailboxes that mount to the wall of the front of your home. So that way, if anybody wants to get mail, they have to have a key. That's number one. That's the easiest way for somebody to establish tenancy, is to have proof of mail coming to a residence. And then from there, you don't allow them to make any agreements with you over the phone. Don't use any language that sounds like you're their landlord. Airbnb has pretty airtight policies on this. Like, you're obviously making an agreement to stay in somebody's home as a short-term resident, and as long as you don't screw up that agreement that Airbnb made with the guest, basically you keep your mouth shut, you should be fine. But even after 28 days, no matter what, if somebody's at your property more than 28 days, they pretty much have established tenancy. And Airbnb kind of is the proof that they've been there for 28 days, even if they don't have mail. So that's it. Now, this woman, of course, she went to jail for taking that self-help practices and just going much farther than she should have. You should all have an attorney for eviction cases. I tried to fight my first one, and I lost my first eviction trying to remove somebody from a property. Then I had to lawyer up and remove that person. And that person wasn't even an Airbnb guest. If you saw that previous video, that was one of my employees for my sales company. I thankfully have never had to evict an Airbnb guest because I've learned my lessons the hard way through other bad tenants that weren't Airbnb ones. So with that said, if you have any questions about this, leave it in the comments. I will link the video where I talk more in depth about the eviction process, so that way you guys can see it. But, oh, and I'll share this article. If you did not see the news that this woman's in jail, you will now be able to read the article. So thanks for watching Airbnb Automated, and I'll see you all on the other side.